Good evening, everyone. Today is August 13th, and I'm going to be discussing the war in Ukraine, focusing mainly on the battlefield in Kursk Oblast, where the ongoing invasion by Ukraine into Russia continues. However, that battlefield has expanded somewhat to impact Belgorod Oblast and potentially even Bryansk Oblast up here. So you can see there are incursions and actual invasions and battles taking place along a long stretch of the Ukrainian-Russian border. Now, as we examine the situation, it's important to note the variation in reports regarding Ukrainian territorial gains. Some are more conservative in their estimates, such as this map right here, showing only the areas that Ukraine is firmly holding, while others are more liberal, including areas where Ukrainian forces have advanced but may not fully control, and I'll show you a map like that in a minute. Now, the map provided by the Institute for the Study of War offers a more conservative perspective, although it does show some advances in areas where there are salients being formed, and I'm talking up in this region right here and this area down here. Those were not present in previous maps that were presented by the Institute for the Study of War. However, as the battlefield expands in Ukraine's favor, it's becoming increasingly difficult for Russia to frame this as a mere anti-terror operation. As you may recall, Russia initially framed these operations under its counterterrorism efforts to portray them as part of a broader anti-terror campaign rather than as a part of the Ukraine war. The Kremlin simply cannot hide that fact anymore. Russia is beginning to evacuate around 200,000 people in Kursk Oblast, and Ukraine is deploying aircraft equipped with American-made JDAM-ER munitions to strike Russian positions in the region, which is a capability that is clearly far beyond what could be attributed to mere terrorists. Meanwhile, Russia has responded with increased missile and drone strikes as well as stronger artillery, but these efforts have only slowed Ukraine somewhat and have not stopped their advances. Now, according to conservative estimates, Ukraine has taken and firmly held at least 400 square kilometers. That is largely what this orange zone is right here. However, when considering the entire operational area where battles are ongoing, the total battlefield encompasses about 800 square kilometers. Now, looking at more ambitious maps, such as this one where we see areas in orange showing Ukraine having positive control and areas in yellow where advances have been made by Ukraine, we can observe the formation of various salients. These are where Ukraine has conducted advances but may not necessarily hold this territory, as you can see here. Now, what is key here is, unlike operations that focus on specific strategic targets, Ukraine is not focused on these specific objectives, so to speak, here. This allows them to be more chaotic and unpredictable in their approach, and this strategy is frustrating Russian forces, as Ukrainian troops can shift their focus, whether it's along border regions down here where we've seen gains, or even expanding here south of the main Kursk effort. They can move west along various axes. They can shoot out along highways. They can shoot out without highways being present. And yes, they can even move into areas that they hadn't previously occupied, all of which is throwing off the Russian ability to counter these movements. President Putin is showing visible frustration, and his daily communications with his cabinet are filled with complaints and anger, especially about the global community's lack of condemnation of Ukraine for what he calls an invasion of Russia.
Well, well, well. How the turntables.
Now, the Kremlin claims to have destroyed 35 Ukrainian tanks, 31 armored personnel carriers, 18 infantry fighting vehicles, and 179 other armored vehicles during this week-long battle. And if these numbers are accurate, we can infer the scale of Ukrainian operations. The destroyed equipment alone would have equaled roughly 1,200 troops in the operation. This doesn't mean they were all killed. It just means that if that's the number of vehicles, that's how many troops you would likely see operating that number of vehicles. Now, based on these figures, known casualty ratios, and the number of troops likely needed to hold the territory Ukraine has gained in this area, combined with the opening of new axes of attack, I estimate between 4 and 7 brigades are operating across Kursk and the surrounding area. However, this is just a broad assessment, and these are not official numbers from Ukraine, as they have not released any official figures regarding the operation, and nor should they. While some have speculated that the strategic value of this area might lie in a pipeline that runs to Europe, it's important to remember that multiple pipelines already pass through Ukraine from Russia to Europe, many of which remain untouched. Destroying a pipeline does not require a full-scale invasion like we're seeing right now, it can be done with a drone. Therefore, I disagree with the notion that this conflict is primarily about a pipeline. That being said, Ukraine is getting value out of the operation in several ways. First, as I spoke about before, it's undermining the image of Putin and the Kremlin to their own people. There's just no way to hide 200,000 people evacuating from a region and trying to spin that in a positive way, especially when you're the one that caused the initial invasion that led to this situation. Secondly, it seems like Ukraine keeps stumbling upon gold mine after gold mine of intelligence as the Russians abandon positions, including entire military bases, as well as leaving hardwired rail lines connected to the main Russian network, so the Ukrainians have been able to hack and watch the rail system in real time. And there's not a lot Russia can entirely do about it right now because the system is hardwired and has been designed to be sabotage proof. This is because no one in Russia really thought anyone would be able to invade Russia and have access to that information. And then finally, it seems like there's an enormous amount of Russian POWs being captured, which all have their own individual intelligence value. There are so many POWs being captured that Ukraine is having to adjust its logistics efforts to exfiltrate them back to Ukraine for processing. Now, this operation is clearly creating wild swings in morale for both sides, and while the Russian morale was already in the basement, having 2,000 soldiers potentially captured as well as your territory being invaded when you previously thought you were untouchable is weighing heavily on the morale of not just the Russian soldiers, but the Russian populace. Meanwhile, it is seen as a striking morale boost for the Ukrainians, showing that they are capable warfighters. And while none of us thought an operation of this magnitude would last as long as it has in Russia, it continues to. So I'm going to continue to keep you all updated.